They recognize the role of jazz music as a genre that deserves a special attention in the evolving South African music industry. That's the Mzantsi Jazz Awards, and they're back after a 2-year hiatus. The sixth edition of the awards takes place at the Soweto Theatre on the 27th of August. Now, to tell us more about the awards, we're joined by the founder, Mzantsi Jazz Awards founder, Dr. Mongezi Makhalima. Sir, good morning. A warm welcome to Morning Live. For someone who may not know, give us a brief background into the Mzantsi Jazz Awards. What is the inspiration behind them?
Thanks, Lebu, for allowing me to speak, and good morning to the viewers and the listeners. Just a quick correction: we never went away. We were here during the pandemic, and we had to learn some very interesting lessons about how to run the Jazz Awards. But the Jazz Awards, I think the intention, it came out of a very quick conversation with a number of jazz heads as we're having conversations, and they're going like, oh yeah, but hey, jazz is not recognized in South Africa. And after a while of this complaining, because it happened for about 3 years, I then decided, why don't we do something? And we brought a couple of people who really know jazz, because I know jazz, but I don't know it as much as they do.
Yeah.
And we created the Jazz Awards that says, let's actually recognize the music of South Africa. But I think the most important thing, Lebu, is how then it became, because the whole idea about the history of jazz and the impact of jazz in South Africa is around how it has been part of our history, a soundtrack of our history. And the MJA is really about honoring that.
And how have the awards grown since, inception?
Well, I'm excited because I was saying to a friend of mine as we were reflecting the other day that when we started this, I didn't even know how far it was going to go. We were thinking we're gonna just do it and then see where it goes, because I'm that kind of guy, right? But 6 years down the line, we have international interest in the Mzantsi Jazz Awards. We are able to actually get a number of our musicians into festivals across the world, which is anyway a tradition that has been in place, but perhaps not as much encouraged as it has in the later periods. So now we have a lot of young people, particularly going into New York, going into Vermont to actually perform with the other international musicians.
I want to talk about the nominations, because we've got nominations on air at the moment. How does that process work?
Many times, in fact, we're moving away from talking about nominations now, because first of all, as we grow, we realize it's not really a competition, right? It is actually a recognition. There is so much beauty, there's so much amazing music in South Africa. What actually is happening now is we talk about people actually nominating themselves to be considered. And then we receive the nominations to be considered from the different stakeholders, either the musicians, either their managers, or otherwise some members of the public. But if it's coming from the member of the public, we still then get to speak to the person that's nominated, so you don't get surprised. And then it ends up in a pool. We have this year we had about 40 to 50 nominees coming through from different spaces. That's already a lot, but it's still not as much as the jazz that has actually come out of this continent, this country this year. And then we have a committee that goes into it, looks into it, and then ranks it based on a criteria which we actually have that is about how is this music contributing to the future of South Africa, to how beautiful, how brilliant this music is, three, the depth of the music itself. And so there's about 5 criteria that we use.
Yeah.
And then the people that you see on the list are the people that made it through the criteria.
Yeah. I'm curious about the we. Who is the we? This committee?
Well, they are quite shy, so they don't actually want to. And I think it makes sense because many times they are very respected
Yeah,
people within the jazz space. So they'd rather not, because with this kind of thing, people then start approaching you, and then
yeah.
it kind of messes up the process. So there's really amazing people that know jazz better than I do who go through this process, and I'm really excited to have them behind me.
And speaking about knowing jazz, you also have the State of South African Jazz Dialogue. Tell us a little bit about that. Who will be part of that conversation?
This is the second one that we are having. So last year we started saying, well, let's talk about this because we have conversations about this all the time. And so last year we were just defining what is jazz, what does it look like in the context of South Africa, etc. And it happened to actually end up on the program of the International Jazz Day, and we were recognized and honored by the Herbie Hancock Foundation for it. But this year, we are now continuing the conversation, and we're asking, is there an audience for jazz in South Africa this year, at this time, in this space? And we have the great Mdumjali, who will be as a musician to help us with some of that conversation. We have Prasai Monjobu, who's a great historian, very passionate about South African jazz. And of course, Spiro Klambi, who I think everybody knows, one of the greatest photographers to ever come out of South Africa. But that's not all, because for me, the panel is just the guys that came together and said, let's talk about it. We have at least 30, 40 people who will be in the room because we want to open this conversation to the jazz community.
And that conversation, does it include women? Because I'm curious now, the poster only has men.
Yes, I got that a lot, and I'm going like, okay, that's actually quite interesting. That let's have that conversation, because isn't that also the state of South African jazz? One of the interesting challenges that we've had, for example, in the Mzantsi Jazz Awards, for the last 6 years that we've been doing it, it's always a very interesting struggle to get female nominees. And I speak to a number of jazz nominees and a number of jazz female musicians, and they share some of their interesting challenges. So the people that are on the poster are the people that we could get to that started this conversation, and there was no lady there. So let's have a conversation. What's happening? What does that poster mean for South African jazz as well? Is it a representation of where we are? It will be interesting to hear.
Yeah, I'd like to find out the outcome of that conversation when, we should be talking about female jazz artists. Yes, we're having this conversation with males. But let's talk about what is in store this year. What have you got planned for the Soweto Theatre later this month?
It's a celebration, absolutely a celebration. I think the best thing about the Mzantsi Jazz Awards is not even the awards, it's the music. Amazing music. Every year, what I look forward to is just to see these performances. So we have performances for most of the nominees that you see on the screen. They will be sharing and celebrating. And so people should come and celebrate the music. And then, of course, then the awards themselves in terms of honoring those people that have contributed in terms of their excellence to jazz this year. But mostly it's a party. I don't know how else to say it. It's a major jazz festival.
Yeah. And how do you ensure that this year's festival is award ceremony rather is different from all your previous ones?
Oh, look, what we're excited about this year compared to last year is last year we had to do it online. It was a fantastic show. We managed to have a whole 3.5-hour movie on jazz and all of that. People were saying we didn't feel like we were online, but it's the first time in 3 years that we are back face to face with people and celebrating. And thank you to the Soweto Theatre because they have agreed to be our home for the Mzantsi Jazz Awards for the next 3 years. So that's where it's actually going to be happening. So that's also what makes it different because before then we were having it in Sandton. So we're taking jazz back to Soweto, where at least I believe the home of Soweto, the home of Sibongile Khumalo, the home of Jonas Gwangwa, the home of Sipho Mabuse. That's where we're taking it.
All right. And are there tickets available? How do people become part of it?
Tickets are available at the Soweto Theatre. People can go to www.sowetotheatre.com and just check there the Mzantsi Jazz Awards and come and join us. And it's a celebration. This is South Africa's music, right?
All right. Dr. Makhalima, thank you so much for talking to us. He's the founder of Mzantsi Jazz Awards. Dr. Mongezi Makhalima speaking to us about the 6th edition of the awards taking place at the Soweto Theatre. That's on the 27th of August.